Shut up.
Do it again.
Shush. We just heard a Bigfoot.
You are never going to believe the story that I'm about to tell you.
Go.
Scream. That's a scream.
Go, go,
That's a
go,
scream.
go,
That's a
go.
scream. That's a scream. That's a scream. Oh my God.
I grew up in a family infatuated with the idea of Bigfoot, with this mystical creature that lives out in the woods. Whether fact or fiction, we've never really cared. We've always enjoyed the stories and the little bit of terror that comes with them. I have uncles that have made a living in the logging industry. They spend lots of times in the forest. That being said, we loved asking them questions about stories that they have about the forest. The woods are a weird place. They can be full of life and fun and bring lots of great experiences, but they can also, in the same note, be terrifying. We loved asking them weird stories, weird encounters that they had or their crew had, and often we'd get them. They'd have stories about bears, about deer, about weird things coming up to them, but typically you could chalk them back to something natural. It was the stories that they couldn't explain. Because we knew they were experts in their field. They knew what was in the forest. When there were things, though, that they couldn't explain, that's what got us intrigued. Being from Washington, there was always this idea of Bigfoot and always a conversation around this creature, Bigfoot. We actually had a Bigfoot costume made for us by my grandma. That costume would come out all the time. My brother, myself, and my cousin would often find ourselves at their house going through the woods. They lived in the middle of a forest. We would go out and we'd cut trails off the beaten path to ride our quads and ATVs on. Oftentimes, though, this would lead us quite a ways away from their house, and they didn't have neighbors nearby, and so we were out in the middle of the forest by ourselves. My uncle, knowing that we were out making these trails, would put on this suit and come and follow us kind of closely. He'd wait till we were a ways away, and then he'd start doing weird things. Always with sound first, because he knew that if he made these weird noises, he could get our brains to start playing the games on us and not scare us by actually us seeing something. But he'd start with rustling a bush, maybe breaking a twig, making weird noises, and often would show a glimpse of himself, just enough to get us worried, to get the brain to start playing those tricks on you. We typically would say, it's just Uncle Greg. Or, it's just a deer. It's just a bear. As long as they know we're out here, we're safe. And it was always that. There was a show called Finding Bigfoot that we loved to watch. It's kind of a joke of a show. It's these people that believe in this animal, Bigfoot, and go out and try and find him. Or it. I don't know if it's a him or what it is. But they go out and try and find it. They go to these hot spots, which are typically Native American land, right? There were Indians, Native American Indians there. And they'd ask people about their encounters. Often, they would go to these Native American places, graveyards, forests on tribal land, somewhere there, because that's where these experiences were happening. And they would wait until the dead of night to go out into the middle of the forest and start doing these weird Bigfoot calls. They would call to him. It would sound like this. We were always so in love with the show
I like that.
because, one, we thought it was a joke. We still kind of think it's a joke.
To be a perfect place for Sasquatches, but in particular, small ones, just like the nurseries or the cribs that we see in other parts of the country.
Yeah, this would be a good crib.
But two, we loved the idea of something possibly responding when they did these calls. Because often they'd do these calls and it would be echoed by just silence. By wind in the trees. The birds would stop. maybe some crickets. But every once in a while, they would hear something weird. A knock on a tree, rocks being thrown, something like that. Sometimes whistles. It was always a little different, but the vast majority of the time it was silent. It was that anticipation of knowing, though, something maybe could respond that kept us on the edge of our seats.
Gosh,
Go,
dude, it
freaking
screams.
go.
It's
That
like
was
a person. Holy
squatch.
crap.
That's a person.
My brother actually tried to figure out how to do this call because we thought it was funny. It was a weird call. So he would practice it, and we'd be out in the woods, and we'd say, Reed, give off this Bigfoot call. See what happens. He'd probably done it about 150 to 200 times. We never hear anything. But every time he does it, there's always that little bit of that feeling. What if something were to respond? Without going too much into more backstory, I want to jump directly to the story I want to talk about. I was a junior in college. I was going to a school in the middle of the state of Washington called Central Washington University. I had just finished my year and my finals, and my parents were actually coming over from the west side, my mom, dad, brother, and sister, from the west side where our other family lives, to come pick me up and bring me back. They came early in the morning because I was done around lunchtime. And they got there and they said, hey, let's go have a picnic somewhere beautiful and by a river or a lake or something and just hang out. We want to jump in the water. So I recommended this place called Cle Elum. It's about 45 minutes to an hour away from where I lived, and just a beautiful lake. We jumped in the car, started driving up there, got some snacks for lunch, and exited the freeway. And it's about 15 minutes off the freeway. Sorry, not 15 minutes. It's about 15 miles off the freeway. It takes about 25 minutes to get to the lake. So we leave the freeway. We start our way on this little winding two-lane road. We never see anyone. We maybe pass one car coming back from the lake into the town, but we never once had someone in front or behind us on the road. This was pretty quiet. I knew it was going to be quiet because no one's typically up there during the week, middle of the school year, early summer. It's typically pretty quiet. Weekends can get busy, but weekdays are typically pretty quiet. But this was more quiet than normal. And we didn't know why, but I figured this would be great because we want to get away from people to enjoy this time just as a family by ourselves. So we get to the bottom of the lake and we drive up about another 10 minutes or so to try and find a road that we can pull off on to get down to the water. We find a dirt road, we pull off it, and we drive down, and sure enough, it takes us to the lake, and there's a big log there, and we say, this is perfect. We can get all of our snacks out, and we can just enjoy this, and jump in the lake, and just enjoy this lunchtime and picnic as a family. We sit down, and we look out over the lake, and all you can see is trees. There's no houses, no roads, no development on the other side of the lake, because it's all logging land. So it's just a bunch of trees. And that's when my dad said, I wonder how many Bigfoot are out in that amount of trees that we can see. This wasn't uncommon for him to say because whenever we're in the woods, we talk about Bigfoot because there's this weird infatuation with them. And we say there's probably so many out there. And so next, we look at Reed and we say, hey, Reed, you should do a Bigfoot call and just see what happens. He says, oh yeah, that sounds great. So he drops his food, he gets up, and he does this big, burrowing Bigfoot call over the lake. Again, the lake's about half a mile to 3/4 of a mile long. There's nothing over there that would hear us. But we just were having fun and having a good time. As soon as he stops, we all hear something behind us. A weird noise. Not too far away from where we parked.
He just made a Bigfoot call. We told him not to because we have all this food out. He made a Bigfoot call facing that way.
What's up?
And we heard something. We heard it respond over there.
Twice it responded.
Yeah. Twice. Do it again.
I don't want to.
We gotta get something.
It was loud enough to really hear it, but quiet enough to not know if we were just hearing things. We all look at each other and we say, did you hear that? What was that? We look at Reed and we say, do it again, but do it that way. So Reed does it, and sure enough, we get another response. This time it sounds a little bit further from where we parked. We go, what in the world? There must be campers back there. It must be someone just responding. We thought it was weird, though, because no one really knew we were down there, for the best of all our knowledge, and they'd have to be really ready to respond, like immediately after he did this call. And you have to be a certain type of person to know what that call even was and how to respond. So we're like, man, these guys are good. But it's weird because it was very loud this second time, especially. It didn't sound like, it just was a weird noise. We didn't know, was it a cow? Was it a horse? Was it a chicken? Was it a dog? We had no idea. And so this is when I pull out my phone and I start recording. Because this is, again, it's a weird situation. So I pull out my phone and we say, Reed, you got to do it again. We're all kind of freaked out, but kind of having fun with it. And before he does this third call, we all look at my dad and say, did you tell Uncle Greg that we're coming out here? Did he just drive 3.5 hours to come try and prank us? And my dad says, no. He would have no idea where we are. And plus, he wouldn't do that. It's not worth his time. It's the middle of the day. Nothing scary happens in the middle of the day. And so it's not him, and we believed him. So I pull out my phone, I start filming, and Reed does another Bigfoot call.
Oh, right. What is that?
It sounds like a chicken.
It's responding, whatever. Did you get that on film? Yes.
Yes, let's get out of here. Pack it up.
Hurry up. Back up. Did you? When we get in the car.
After he does it, we hear it again. Is it a chicken? Is it a moose? Is it a cow? Is it a deer? Is it a dog? What in the world is this thing? This time, though, it sounded like it was further back than the other two that we had heard. This is the third time we heard this thing. It was weird. It sounded like the first one was right about where our car was parked. The second one was a little bit further back, kind of by the road where we were. So there was a road, there was a section of trees, and then we were down here by the rocks and by the lake. This one sounded like it was on the other side of the road. It was further back. And so we were kind of like, this is weird because it's moving away from us. A camper wouldn't do that because they'd be somewhere around here, but we haven't seen anyone. There's no houses around here. And this thing is going up this hill. It's a big hill. It's like a mountain behind us. But we can't see it because it's pretty thick with trees. So this was enough for us to be a little concerned and be like, okay, we're going to get out of here. This is weird. And that's not normal for my family. We don't get scared by things that we don't, like, we thought it was a deer. We thought it was a chicken, something weird. But it was enough for us to get in the car and leave. So we make our way to the car. We get in it. I position it to start leaving. And then we all look at Reed one more time. Reed, give one more call. He says, no, this is creeping me out. I don't want to do this. And we just said, Reed, do it one more time. Come on, we're in the car. We can leave. We feel safe in here. So he rolls down the window. And this is when we don't know how to explain what happened next. Thinking about it still gives me goosebumps. This happened 3 years ago. 4 years ago, actually. You can ask my dad, my mom, my brother, and my sister, and no one knows what this last noise was. So Reed rolls down the window. He does the call. Before he can even finish it, we hear a blood-curdling scream from a woman way up the hill, far away. But it's as clear as day to all of us.
That's it.
Holy crap! No, that's
Go.
a scream. That's a scream.
Go.
This sounds like a woman is being stabbed and ripped open. Like a blood-curdling scream. I've never heard this voice or this sound come from a human being, ever. This was like someone on their dying deathbed, screaming for the life of them. We all looked at each other and go, what the heck was that? Someone is dying. Like, this thing's killing people. If that was a person pranking us, they are killing people. This sound was totally different than the other 3 noises that we heard before. This was different, but still responding to the same call. We actually asked ourselves, do we call the cops? Because someone actually could be getting killed up in the woods right now. And we're just here listening to it. And you just heard it. What is it? We quickly get in the car. We're kind of all weirded out by this thing. And we don't know how to rationalize it. We get back into cell service and immediately start looking things up. Cle Elum, what is it known for? Sure enough, it's Indian land. Cle Elum Bigfoot sightings. Sure enough, people are out hiking. They hear these screams. People see things. People go and pay respects to their family at graveyards, and they get chased off the graveyards by some big furry something. They trip, they get up, they look behind them, and there's nothing there. We find article after article about all of these sightings in Washington. And we knew Washington was a hotspot. This is where a majority of these shows are filmed. But it was fascinating to see all of the different instances that were happening in the same area that we were at. The thing, though, that really got us was we went back to the Finding Bigfoot sites, that show, and we looked up what noises do Bigfoots make, or do Bigfoot make. The first vocalization that they explain was a woman screaming at the top of her lungs.
High-pitched scream like a woman being murdered in the woods. Sometimes they're long and drawn out. Sometimes they're short, like this.
Gosh!
I don't know. It's screaming.
Dude,
back,
it
though.
screams!
Dude.
Is it those deer? I have
Oh
no
my
idea.
gosh!
Go,
Dude, it
freaking
screams!
go.
It's
That
like a
is
person.
swamp.
Holy
I don't think
crap!
that's a person. That's not a person. I
That's
thought it was
Oh my
a
gosh!
person.
That's legit a Sasquatch.
Shush, shush, shush.
One of the more common vocalizations is often described as a high-pitched scream like a woman being murdered in the woods.
That's what we heard. What do you think it was?